Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's show. And thank you for tuning in. Today, we want to introduce you to Kirstin Carey. After freeing herself from celiac disease Hashimoto's, Kirstin has become a leading expert in helping others stop symptoms, reverse disease progression, and heal from autoimmune disorders. Her training and education as a certified holistic nutritionist, professional chef, neurolinguistic programming practitioner, cognitive behavioral therapy practitioner, and certified tapping practitioner. So many qualifications there. And her work with hundreds of autoimmune clients and her own personal healing journey has helped her cohesively tie together the three crucial components: nutrition, science, and soul, which are needed to heal and reach autoimmune freedom. So welcome to the show, Kirstin. It's great to have you here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So I would love to jump right in and get you to just introduce yourself for us. For any of our listeners that might be meeting you for the first time, tell us about you. What's life been like? What's led you to this moment to do what you're doing today?
Oh, big question. So I wasn't the kid who dressed up as a nutritionist for Halloween. Like, I had no interest in doing this. This was not my calling. But I knew I wanted to be in business. So I ended up starting a sales and marketing consulting company that went on for many years. But I was really sick, and I didn't know it at the time. And symptoms kept piling up and piling up and piling up. And it finally got to the point where I'm like, there's something bigger wrong here. So down a path of all the doctors, all the medications, all the scopes, and all of the just awkward doctor's visits and all that, I finally got into more natural medicine, and somebody diagnosed me with celiac disease. And I was like, what is celiac disease? And my mom had already had Hashimoto's, but I really wasn't paying that much attention to that. And I started then investigating, because she said, just stop eating gluten and you'll be fine, and take these several $100s of supplements. And I was like, but I really didn't feel that much better. I was excited about the diagnosis because I thought, good, we can start solving some of these problems. And because I really wasn't still getting answers, and I was digging into my pocket over and over and over, paying for just all of these different modalities and things, I finally decided to go back to school. And I got my first certification in nutrition. Then I went back to a school that was much more advanced and got my next certifications. And then I started digging in hard. All the alphabet soup letters after my name started dragging me more into, or getting me more into, understanding more about just the understanding of our soul, our emotional state, those things. But in the middle of all of this, I thought it'd be a brilliant idea to open up a restaurant, because when you're exhausted and tired and closed your other company, restaurants are the best thing to do. But what was awesome about that's when I started really honing my cooking skills, but learning how to do it on a commercial level, and really developing more recipes that helped in healing. And that's what the restaurant was. We were the first solely gluten-free restaurant in Arizona. We had no gluten, dairy, soy, or peanuts in the restaurant. And we kind of became known as the place to go. So then I started taking on clients at that point, and we would do food sensitivity testing. We'd start understanding, and I'd create diets for them. And then my chefs would actually make the food for them based on their food sensitivities, their diets, their restrictions. So we started getting known for that. So I opened up a wellness center component to the restaurants. And that was kind of the weaving in and out of figuring it out the whole time, trying to figure out for myself how to heal even more. And then I was also diagnosed with Hashimoto's on top of that. So that's how I ended up in autoimmune, and not just health in general, but that's how I ended up in autoimmune. My husband then left his full-time job as an IT professional at a law firm, went back to school for nutrition. So he's board certified holistic nutrition, all these other letters after his name that have to do with science and biophysiology and chemistry and certified personal training. And he's got he's the letters I don't have, right? So we have all the alphabet. But he then came on the team at that point, and then we just started growing much more to help people at a fuller level. So that was kind of a long answer, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that so much. I think one of the things that we've seen a lot of people struggle with since our fitness days, really, it is that convenience and ease, as well as obviously the knowledge of how do they then implement the changes they need to make in their life. So the fact that you had the restaurant and the chefs were making it for them, it takes a lot of the hurdles out of the equation for people as well. So I think it's awesome that that was kind of one of your entry points into this. I think that's incredible. Is that still open today?
No, we decided what was happening is basically the restaurant it was a really good way to pay everybody else but myself. So it was killing me slightly. So I took a book, page out of my own book and said, why are you suffering? You want to help more people. But the wellness center was just picking up speed. So in 2017, we were on our third location. I looked at it and said, okay, what do I really want to be doing? I had to have a really good heart to heart with myself. And the wellness is what was really calling me. The restaurant was just kind of a piece. So we decided to close out the restaurant piece. We sold off all the other, the equipment and everything. And then we broadened out what we were doing with the wellness. And then we went online. We started, because more and more people were coming to us outside the area and saying, can you help me too? So we figured out how to make everything that we do work. Even if you're, because we have clients in 12 different time zones. So we've got people over in the UK and Canada and all across the United States. So before it was super popular, we went solely online, everything that we did. So we became a virtual office. And then 2018, we closed out all of the commercial pieces, which worked out very well for us when COVID hit, because we didn't have any commercial space. Everything was in the house and we were fully online already. So that was just a brilliant, awesome move that worked in our favor.
Yeah, nice.
Awesome. So during that time, while obviously all that was happening, talk us through your kind of healing journey from obviously your autoimmune, from that Hashimoto's and celiac disease. What was going on that personal end?
Yeah, so I mean, it was hard. I mean, I grew up in a more traditional house where you used traditional medicine. You didn't do anything that was kind of outside of that, because that was weird. You didn't do natural medicine. It just wasn't a thing. And so from the time I was younger, now that I can start piecing it together backwards, from the time I was younger, I had symptoms that were very telling of autoimmune. We obviously have it in the family. My mother has challenges. My grandmother, on all sides, we had autoimmune issues. But I started looking at it and saying, I had a lot of stomach issues as a kid. And, I had, from the very first time I had my menstrual cycle, I had problems from the very first day. And the doctors just kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, well, that's normal. What they really meant to say was that's common, but it's not normal. It's not good. And they would just, they threw me on birth control at 14. They threw me on major pain medications because of the cramping and the migraines. But they say that's normal. And then when you start piling on, the issues, and I had skin rashes and I had allergies and but that was normal in my family, or that was not. So, the medications, and that they also caused their own problems. So as I got older, and then finally in my 30s, that's when things started getting really bad, where I was getting foggy brain a lot of the times. I was having these more anaphylactic allergy responses. It seemed it was out of nowhere. We couldn't figure out what was going on. I had an attack on a plane one time. It was a whole scene. It just started getting to the point where things were just piling. And what I didn't appreciate, even at that time, was the amount of stress my body was under, emotionally, mentally, and physically. But I used to celebrate how good I was at compartmentalizing feelings, and I didn't have feelings. I just squashed them, and I was so good at it. But I was basically conditioned or trained that way. My dad used to celebrate when we didn't cry. He used to get so excited. So I was like, oh, cool, Dad's going to love me even more. I mean, you think this at 4 or 5 years old. And you start looking at that and go, that was part of my story too, because I remember at 4 years old playing ball with my dad. He threw the ball and it ricocheted off the glove and hit me in the face and split my lip open. And he, picked me up and ran into the kitchen with me, and I'm bleeding. And my mother's trying to make a roast, and she looks up and sees her firstborn bleeding from the face. And she's like, what happened? And my dad is like beaming. He's so excited. He's super smiley. My mother said, what is wrong with you? Why? And he goes, look at her. She's not crying. And I remember that moment thinking, oh, this is a good thing. Not crying is good, and Daddy loves me more. I mean, you start to make these connections when you're a little kid. And most people don't understand that those connections then start to create our identities. And then I used to look for proof that if I didn't cry, that was a good thing. We were celebrating that. So up until my 30s, I used to celebrate when I could suck it up, walk it off, deal with whatever the problem was. I didn't need to, voice my opinion because it was going to be fine. And then I realized more and more that that was a lot of the reason my body was shutting down on me. It was angry that I wasn't being able to express who I really was. So that has a lot to do with where my particular symptoms came from. And when you look at autoimmune disease specifically, it's the body attacking self. So you have to sit there and say, well, why would my body be not protecting me, which is my immune system's job to protect and to help me heal? Why would it be the one thing that's attacking me and making things worse? Well, if you look at it just emotionally or energetically, if you are not expressing who you truly are, your body stops recognizing you. So there's an attack that starts to go on because there's pieces of you it doesn't recognize. And then there's other physical things that go into play and how you think about yourself. We have clients who don't think they're worthy. We have clients who show up and they've been abandoned in some way by a family member or themselves. So when they start feeling lesser than, the immune system doesn't recognize to protect that part of you because you don't think you're worth anything. And a lot of that starts before we're even 8 years old. So there's a lot of subconscious stress going on. And a lot of people don't appreciate how severe that is, in addition to food and all the other stuff. So I finally started getting a handle on that. Once I started understanding that, then my symptoms started taking a U-turn and things started getting better. And then I started understanding more about the subconscious, more about how we work, more about what stress really is to the system. Because doctors would ask me all the time, what are you stressed out about? I'm like, nothing. Because I was so used to my stress being here, that was normal, right? So again, normal versus common. Yeah,
that's explained beautifully, and I really hope our listeners can take home the connection that you've made there between our emotional well-being and our past experience and health, because for so long they've been treated so separately. And that's one of the reasons why we created wellness theories, because we was just when we started to learn this, we're like, why does nobody talk about this? Obviously there were people talking about it in different corners of the world, but it wasn't mainstream. And we want to make sure these conversations get into the general population, right? And you've got such an inspiring story then of how you've then healed. But before we jump into that, I'd really love you to define what is stress? What is stress in your eyes? And then what is that in relation to autoimmune disorders? And if there is a difference in your eyes between stress and trauma?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. So stress is anything that causes your body to feel inflamed or out of balance. So anything emotional, mental, or physical. And the body doesn't differentiate between emotional stress, mental stress, or physical stress. So if you're eating a food, let's say that's a food sensitivity or a food allergy, that's stress on the body because the body believes it's in danger. That's our primary thing, is to not die. So our subconscious is wired to say, what's going to keep us to not die today? That's all it cares about. So if it looks at a food that's causing some sort of allergic reaction or poison, the body says, hey, this could cause us to die. Let's have a reaction and let everybody know. That's stress on the system. If you have an emotional trauma, an emotional thought that brings you back to a moment that you thought you were in danger over, that's stress on the system. And any memory or anything that triggers that causes stress. Your ability to think your way through something or understand the perspective that is true is important to the understanding of, if you look at a situation and you think everyone's against you and you don't actually see the moment for what it is, the body thinks it's in danger, it puts you into a stress situation. That's where you see anxiety, that's where you see depression. But they're all connected. And that's where I love what you said. We are not separate pieces. We're not, here's an emotional doctor, go deal with that. Here's a doctor that does this, or the practice. We are one whole thing, that if you would do anything emotionally, you're going to affect the body physically. If you do anything mentally, you're going to affect the body emotionally. It's all one piece. You can't separate them. So that's where I see stress coming in. Anything that causes the body to feel out of balance or inflamed. The thing that a lot of people say is, I can handle stress. And I'm like, yes, we are designed to process and handle stress. But if you're not processing the stress the way your body wants you to, And this is where it starts to get tricky. If you have symptoms, the body said, hey, you're not processing stress the way I want you to.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you can't handle it.
Exactly. We call that you're either surviving stress or you're actually completing stress, right? You're like, most people think they're handling it, like you've said, but actually most of the time, we don't know that we're even stressed. Like I have a similar kind of backstory to you in that I didn't even know that all of those little moments, those things were issues. Like I had no idea. So like, if I didn't know I was stressed, how was I handling it? It's just like, it doesn't make any sense.
Right. So you just see people say, well, I'm doing meditation. Well, and I'm like, that doesn't mean you're processing. That doesn't mean your body is releasing and dissolving the stress and rewiring what was stressing you. We need stress. There's actually good levels of stress and there's bad levels of stress. But when we're in a constant state of stress, a constant state of fight or flight, the body is in a constant state of thinking it might die. All your resources are going to that. So if you have all your resources going to the try not to die in this moment, you don't have it for healing. You don't have it for protection. You don't have it for calming the system, making hormones, digesting, any of that. So I don't think people fully, because we don't learn this stuff, not the way I think we should on a basic level. That should be normal. That should be common knowledge, but I don't think it is.
Yeah.
So the second part of your question, you asked me about autoimmune. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in before we go into autoimmune. What's your thoughts on the difference between stress and trauma?
So trauma creates levels of stress. Trauma to me can be positive or negative. So like the story I just told about my dad when I was a kid, that's positive trauma, the way that we define it, because I thought I was doing something good. And I used to celebrate about myself. This is good. But my body was saying, when you're celebrating that, what you're doing is shutting down my ability to communicate and to feel and have a human experience. So I'm looking at this actually reinforcing the I don't have emotions. My body is like, can you help me? We're drowning. Because I'm an emotional being. We all are. But I thought I was not allowed to be that way. So that's a positive trauma. Then you can see things that are more obvious negative traumas. You have sexual abuse, you've got all levels of abuse. And what people tend to do when they've been abused, they've had negative traumas, if we look at it that way, is they tend to shove it down as well. Then other emotions come out, like shame. Shame is, to me, the most primal toxic emotion we have, because it inherently causes us to want to hide whatever it is and not surface. So you can't process something that's not being surfaced. Because if you look at it, we are wired to be within our tribe, in our group, because you are less likely to be able to stay alive on your own than you are with a group. So shame brings us to a point, if you're found out, and I have to hide this, because if I'm found out, I'll be thrown from the group, I'll be ousted from the tribe, and my survival goes down. My survival instinct or abilities go down. So when I look at traumas, they're typically moments in time that we then build our emotional stability on, we build our identities on. And again, I would celebrate that I was this compartmentalizer, this non-emotional person, blah, blah, blah. And I built my identity on that, but that's not who I really was. So some of the traumas that come in, you start to see people being in conflict with who they thought they were supposed to be or who they were conditioned to be and who they really are. That's an identity crisis. That's a conflict. That's a literal war inside of you, which causes fear. So back to your question, is the difference between trauma and stress. They go hand in hand, but trauma is more of the incident or the belief that's causing the stress.
Nice.
At least that's my definition on the fly.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Like we always say, like stress is the symptom of trauma more often than not. And it's interesting the way you describe trauma as being positive or negative, because I think it's very easy for us to not know like where a certain stress is coming from if they were positive traumas, right? Normally we're very aware. If it's a negative trauma, it's like we know what's happened. Right? But if it's a positive trauma, it just kind of it's almost like a I don't know, like a just this thing that we brush over because we don't know that we're supposed to pay attention to it. So I really
or we reinforce it.
Yeah.
Like, and that's where it gets really interesting. A lot of our clients are A-type personalities. They're go-getters, they're doers, they're achievers. They're people you would go to help get something done. But what you start to see is that there's a perfectionism level to them, which is a trauma. It's a red flag that there's a trauma. It's a trauma response. It's perfectionism. The Florence Nightingale syndrome, as we call it, is that ability that people have to help everyone, but they forget to help themselves, or they always end up at the end of the list if there's time left over. But they celebrate their ability to help everybody. They celebrate their things to push through and get it done, to be powerful, to be strong. And a lot of the times that's why the symptoms are showing up the way they are, to slow them down. So you'll see people having severe fatigue, or they have a lot of pain in their hips or their legs, so they literally can't start moving anymore, and they're shut down. And you start to see a lot of symptoms that line up with the, well, if you're not paying attention, I'm going to make you pay attention. I'm going to shut you off. So it starts to get super interesting when you see what the symptoms are for each person, because it means something from their body, their message saying, hey, there's something not right here.
What are some of those other symptoms, aside from the ones you've already mentioned? Because we mentioned that connection between, obviously, the mental, the emotional, the physical, and the physical symptoms we experience are a manifestation of what's going on inside, of how we're feeling, how we're thinking. Exactly. So it's people think the symptoms are, oh, it's a medical problem, I need to get tablets, but instead of listening and going, what actually am I feeling? What am I experiencing? So what are some of those symptoms that people can look out for that potentially might be related to autoimmune?
Great question. So fatigue is the one we see the most frequently, especially when it feels more like exhaustion, or your body's literally trying to shut you off. Like, I can't function right now. Or just fatigue that you're just like, why am I tired? I've only been awake for a couple of hours, or I have to have the coffee kind of fatigue. Digestive issues, absolutely a huge sign, because whatever's going on in your gut and your digestive system is a major issue of what you're going on in your thoughts. But if your body isn't processing, a lot of times it means you're in stress, because one of the first systems your body takes away from or shuts down when you're in stress is your digestive system, because it figures, well, if I have to run from a bear, I don't need to digest this hamburger I just ate. Let me either eliminate it really quick, which is where you see diarrhea or you see constipation. The other system that it really pushes a lot of pressure on when you're in stress mode is the adrenals. And your adrenals, premenopausal, and I'm talking about men and women because we go through a similar process. Premenopausal, men and women, half of their hormone production is their adrenals, half is their sex organs. So as we get closer to menopause, we start to struggle more if our adrenals are on fire all the time. So you see hormone imbalance. So that's another huge red flag that we've got something major going on when you can't balance your own hormones. Because now there's this message that's being given to us that, well, when you hit menopause or you just start to get older, men need more testosterone, women need, bioidenticals, we need to, and that's not correct. Just because you've hit menopause or you're in this age group doesn't mean you should just replace them. The question would be, why aren't I making my own or converting them properly? But we've kind of bought into the idea of, well, I'm old, I just need something else to do it. Thyroid, any thyroid disorder, huge red flag that we need to start looking out for, not just autoimmune, but we need to start looking at every other system in the body, because the thyroid impacts everything just as the adrenals do. Migraines, pain in general, it's a sense. Pain kind of wants you to pay attention in a very dramatic way. We also see a lot of skin issues. So if we start seeing skin issues that are showing on the face, that's the body's way of screaming so loud that says, you can't ignore this because everybody else can see this too. Yeah. So the skin issues as well. So they're the most common ones that we typically see.
So if somebody was experiencing some of those symptoms, like, what would you say is their first step? What should they look at first?
Well, first of all, I just want them to take a deep breath, because and just be grateful the body is still communicating with them. I mean, honestly, we teach our clients that every symptom is a sign that your body still loves you and it's trying to tell you something. It's just not speaking a language you understand right now. It also is telling them where to look, whether they realize it or not. The second thing to do is to, really look at how much medication are you taking? How much toxic stuff am I putting into my system? Or there's a lot of sodas, a lot of coffee. Am I really leaning on something to do the work for my body or not? And then to ask themselves, am I willing to change anything in order for this to change? Because we have people who come to us and say, well, I really want this to be different because I can't take this anymore. And we say, okay, well, there's some things we're going to have to do differently. And they're like, well, I'm not willing to change my lifestyle. And I'm like, whatever you're doing is giving you the result you're having. So something has to change, right? So where are you giving power is another question that I like to ask people. Are you giving it to the cheese that you say you can't give up, but you're telling me you're in severe pain? Like, what's more important to you? And there's no judgment. It's just start to understand what's actually driving my decisions. I mean, obviously, they're welcome to go to our website. We've got a ton of stuff on there that's free that they can read, get an understanding of, is this the right process for me? But really, I want everyone to just know the body is brilliant. It was designed to heal. So you have what you need. You just may need some tools and some support to figure out how to put the pieces together to make the puzzle complete. But we all have this ability. And we talk about our clients all the time. We have a client who, thyroid disorder, she had Graves' disease. The doctor, 12 hours after she started working with us, her endocrinologist called her and said, I've seen your most recent lab results. If you don't have your thyroid taken out immediately, you will die. A little dramatic. But so she called us up and said, what do I do? And I'm like, well, I can't tell you what to do. What I can do is educate you, and you have to make the decision based on what you know and feel. So we talked about it, and I'm like, if they remove your thyroid, that's not coming back. That's not a thing that grows back. You can't, and it affects every system in the body. So she said, okay. So she called back and she said, I've decided I want to work. Just let's see what we can do in the first couple of weeks. And then I can always do the surgery. The doctor insisted she had to have it taken out. She said, no, just give me some time. Within the first 12 weeks, her numbers reversed so well that she said, okay, I know I'm on the right path. So we continued to work through our year-long program. At the end of the program, she goes back to the same doctor. She has the same lab results back. He does not contact her for 2 weeks. He was so sure that the lab messed up because her numbers were so much better that he tried to investigate what had happened. He finally calls her and says, I've never seen this. You are a miracle. You're so good at this point, I wouldn't even diagnose you with anything. And I've never seen this. So she writes my husband an email telling him the whole story. And she's just saying, he kept saying I was a miracle and kept saying, what am I doing? What pill are you taking? She said, well, I'm not taking anything. I'm working on my emotional state. I'm learning how to balance. I'm processing my stress. I'm processing my inflammation. And I'm eating the way that my body wants me to eat. He just kept saying, well, there has to be more. You have to be doing something because I've never seen this. And as much as I love the story for her, of course, it makes me sad at the same time because she's not a miracle. Her body was designed to do exactly what it did. And the fact that he says he's never seen it, it's because he never even believed it was possible and just tried to chuck her on a bunch of medication and yank her thyroid.
Yeah.
So what makes me so sad is that we are all miracles within if we just let that happen. And we hear stories like that from our clients all the time.
Yeah.
But it makes me sad that you would hear that from a doctor, like, I've never seen this, you're a miracle. And I'm like, is she though? Like, let's not say it's 1 in a billion.
Yeah. And
it's normal.
It's scary as well to me that the doctor would then write that off as a miracle rather than let me investigate and find out what you've been doing so that I can share this.
Right.
Right. Like, I mean, this isn't like a doctor bashing. Like, we believe that medicine has its place, of course. But I do think there's such a level of responsibility that is needed. Anybody has a responsibility for themselves, but if you're in a role where you're supposed to be helping others, then that onus is on you to go out and learn and investigate and understand, rather than just write it off as, oh, well, you're special.
Exactly. But there's so many stories, like, and research and case studies out there of people who've done the same thing, who've healed themselves, who've gone through the standard clinical routes, pills, everything, nothing's working, and then went through the holistic route of focusing on mind, body, heart, and soul, and then healing themselves from all manners of ailments, from minor ones to really, really life-threatening ones. And there's so many of these now, and people are still questioning it. And I think it's important. There's so many. It's like you said. It's normal. It's not a miracle.
Yes.
We all have that ability, but the problem is, as I said, we just don't believe we do. We're conditioned into believing that only the external can help us heal. Everything inside doesn't matter. And it's important we start to switch that perception and start to realize that we have everything we need. We just, like you said, we need that guidance. We need that kind of blueprint to guide us in the right direction to be able to become more aligned so we can heal ourselves. And I think the more we believe that and lean into that, it starts to become more powerful, and everyone starts to take back that power and start to realize that I have that control over my own body. I don't need to surrender that control to a doctor or to this person or to that person. I can take back that control. And like you said, you educate them, and then they make the choice. So, okay, what sounds more relevant, like, or what sounds relatable to you? What sounds like it could work for you? Try it. Get good results, great, keep with it. And then, when you start to educate, people can ask the right questions, and then when they do go see a doctor or a specialist, they can ask the right questions and go, okay, I've done my research on this is how I'm feeling, blah 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 blah, like this is where I think maybe I should start, and then ask the opinion, instead of just going, I don't know what's going on, I'm feeling like this, please help me, and then they just blindly take the advice from anyone they ask.
Yeah. And you said something really important in that, and you talked about, you have to feel aligned basically with whatever process you're doing. You have to feel that it's right for you. And that's part of the problem. I think people have tried so many things. It's because they don't know what else to do. Somebody says this works. They're like, it doesn't, I'm not aligned with it, but okay. And then they start getting this pile of things that don't work. And then they start believing they can't heal. Yeah. So we're really clear when we first meet people, we have two processes. They have to go through, well, they have to fill out a bunch of stuff. We have to, see their information first. Then they meet with Anthony for a period of time to see, is this even a good fit? Then they meet with me for a much longer time, and we pull it all apart. We look for what's really stopping them. Is this the right program? Because I don't want us to be on the pile of things that don't work. I want them to find the right solution for them. And if it's not right, I had a woman this week that I just said to her, you're not aligned with what we do, and I don't want to see you not get the result. And she was like, but I think I want to do this. And I'm like, I don't think about it. Like, I know what works for people, and you're not sure. Like, she was in that fear state. And I'm like, if you're not sure, then this isn't going to work the way that it could. And I want to see you heal. So she was like shocked, but we get results. Like, our clients get results for a reason. It's because we're also very clear on who is the best person to go through this. Are they ready? Because this isn't easy. It's simple. It's a very simple process, but it's not necessarily easy because we're digging into stuff. We're understanding, where are those wounds? What has happened? What is keeping you stuck? What can't you see because you set up a defense mechanism to hide it from yourself? And some of that feels yucky sometimes, but that's the very thing that is the block in your way. So are you ready for this? Do you trust that this is the right process? So it's the alignment, I think, with the practitioner, with the process, with what's going on. But if a doctor's just handing you a pill and saying, well, there's no other choice, we have no other solution, that to me is suspect.
Yeah, I think it's okay to be skeptical, and on some level it's okay obviously to be fearful when you're about to dive into something that's going to change your life. But it's like you said, it's that level of trust and willing to be vulnerable with ourselves and obviously the practitioner that you're working with. And as long as that willingness is there, you can, most of the time you can just guarantee the results, because if that willingness is there,
and they can
they're going to see it through.
Right. They can be nervous. Of course, there's going to be some level of excitement that's nervous. I don't know what I'm up against. I don't know what I haven't been able to see. Yeah, I get that. But they come into it with this willingness to do something different than what they've done before. They're not just white knuckling and saying nothing. Like the woman, I think the woman I was just talking about, literally said, I don't want to change anything about anything I believe. And I'm like, I'm not trying to change you what you believe, but if you won't change anything, nothing's going to change.
Nothing's going to work. It doesn't matter if it's you, us, or anyone in the world. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm not trying to change your belief system. It's just what is keeping you stuck. You have to be willing to change something. And people are like, yes. And you have to be willing to show up for yourself, put yourself first. Yeah. And, we have people that would try and get to the program and they would just not show up for anything. I'm like, that's not how it works. You can just pay your way in and it magically fixes it. Yep. So it's that understanding, and we're pretty on top of that. Like, are you willing to actually physically show up, mentally show up, emotionally show up? Raise your hand when it gets hard, because it's gonna.
So you get those people, they're all in mentally, emotionally, physically, they come to you. How do you help them? Like, what is your three crucial components? You mentioned like nutrition, science, and soul. How does that work?
Yep. So we have a team here now. So it was just me when I first started. Anthony then joined the team. We now have coaches, and every one of the people on the team, except for Anthony, has gone through our program. They've been trained additionally. So, I mean, we have a level of people who just get it because they've been there, done that, and they've all reversed out of something. So there's three components. There's basically the nutrition piece. We go after the right diet for the person, not the perfect diet that everyone does. It's the right diet for the person. Gluten and dairy will never be part of that process, but the right diet for the person, we dial that in and we teach them that. The second piece is the supplemental process. And we found most people are on way too many supplements. They're leaning too heavily onto them. We're a less is more kind of approach to that. And then we look at the movement component. Are you doing the right movement for you? Anthony is certified personal trainer. Brianna, one of the coaches, she's certified in yoga and breathing techniques and a bunch of other pieces there. So we look at the body there from the nutrition piece. We then look at the science piece. Anthony takes over a lot of that component for the company. We do certain labs, but we don't do a ton of them because we're not looking for a magic unicorn that's hiding in a corner somewhere. We're looking for the brown horses that are really going to help us get you back on track and balanced. So we have some specific labs, and we'll review every lab that they've done themselves for the last 2 years to see if there are pieces missing. Because we're looking for specific patterns as well, because this is what we do all day long. And we look at them as a whole person, not just an endocrine system or a digestive system. We look at the physiology, what's going on with your body, what are the symptoms, what are they telling us, how is that helping? And then we look at epigenetics as well, which is kind of the environment that are influencing your genetic expression. So what are the environmental pieces, emotionally, mentally, and physically? And then the third piece is the soul piece, as we call it. That just means it's the essence of you. It's what makes you who you are. And this is where more me and some of the coaches get involved here. We look at what's your purpose? What's driving you? Have you lost a sense of purpose? Are you disconnected from it? Are you driving through a purpose that really isn't who you are? So the purpose becomes a major piece. Second piece is identity. And we talked a little bit about this, but if you're in an identity conflict where you're trying to be who you were supposed to be versus who you really are, and we see more people pushing through this around 35, 36, 37 years old. That's when the brain, actually there's a shift in the brain right around that age that starts asking you to start questioning, who am I? Who was I supposed to be? Where am I going? There's just this interesting thing. So most of our clients fall into that 35 to 55-year-old component, but the identity piece, and are you in conflict with yourself? And then the final piece we look at is paradigm, or this is your thoughts, feelings, beliefs, who you thought you were supposed to be, but it's a filter that you use over everything that you do, every action you take, every decision that you make, every perception that you have. And usually your paradigm was decided by the time you were 8. And that has a lot to do with how the brain works and how it functions. So we help people also understand what their paradigms are, and is that what they want it to be, and how do you rewire it if it really isn't serving you? So it's kind of a really quick approach to how we kind of take it from all sides, and really support people. But we have everybody on the team, has their part. But Anthony and I are both, and our one of our third team members. There we go. Sometimes the words aren't always there. We all take on the nutrition piece as well, and then we kind of feed out more to the emotional trauma release, trauma healing pieces as well.
Brilliant. I love your approach. It's very, very aligned with what we do, for sure. And I think I want to go back to one of the things that you've mentioned there. I mean, it's all relevant, it's all important, but to pull out the identity piece, I think is really important, because I feel, and this is my opinion based on people that we've worked with, my own experience as well, is that if we don't look at that identity piece sooner rather than later, that can sometimes be the difference of somebody staying the course or not with whatever it is they're trying to achieve. So at what point do you start speaking about the identity piece? And could you just elaborate a little bit more on that for our listeners? What does that actually mean?
So, I mean, it's really who you think you are. So if somebody sat down, and this is one of the exercises that we have people do, we have them sit down with a piece of paper and you write, I am, and then whatever comes next, you just let that word come out, that sentence come out. And then they go down to the next line and they write, I am again. And they keep doing, I am, till they run out of space. They do it as fast as they can, because we don't want them thinking too hard. We don't worry about spelling or penmanship, or just get to the bottom of the page as fast as possible and flip the page and don't look at it again. Then they do it again the next day. They don't read it back. They do it the next day. Same thing, flip the page, don't read it back. Third day, we do it all every day for a week. On day 8, they then go back and they look at what they wrote and they start looking for patterns. They start looking for words that they use frequently, like afraid, scared, upset. And then we start understanding more about your identity is more of somebody of fear, somebody is who's afraid of what's going on, who's very protective. Or if they even use things like they identify with who they are to someone else, like I am a mother, I am a wife, I am a coworker. It gives us more of an understanding of who do you identify, how are you identifying with the world? Yeah. And so it's a really helpful exercise. It's very quick, but then it helps us to start seeing where there's some traumas or some underlying blocks. And so when you really look at identity, it's who do you think you are versus who you really are. If you were able to get quiet and to say, but who am I really? And have I been holding that back or altering that because of what I'm afraid other people will think, or what I was told was good versus bad? You know, I'm an emotional person. I knew it from the time I was a kid, but I was told emotions were bad and you were going to celebrate it if you didn't have them. So I developed a skill to shut all that down. Well, of course it didn't disappear. It just festered and became other physical issues and challenges. But that's where it starts to get super interesting. We also identify with what our families are. Well, my family's sick. My family is fat. Well, my family has digestive problems. So we just kind of lean into that sometimes. And that's just who we identify as. Is that who you really are? And people, the question I can ask people that just freezes them in their tracks is, what do you want? And they're like, huh? And it goes right to identity. And they're like, I don't know what do you mean? What do I want? Like, what is it you want? And it's scary because it challenges them in so many different ways. But the IM exercise, it's incredibly powerful, and you can do it at any stage of your healing. We encourage people to do it often to see where they're shifting and what's going on with that. So did that help with at least more of the identity piece?
Yeah, absolutely. I just think it's such an important pillar, and again, something I feel like that isn't talked about enough, and because I think really we start to get to the truth and seeing where are we operating from, and what space do we have to grow here. You know, like if you can align yourself every day, remembering who it is you really are, not buying into old patterns and old stories, then you can create anything that you want to create in your life, because it's coming from a place of truth and alignment.
Right. Yep. And I think a lot of people get scared because, you know, the tallest poppy gets cut, you know, we get pulled out and we get shamed if we're different. I mean, we're essentially in most areas, especially in more like United States, you know, England over Canada, we start to see a lot of people, what happens is the school systems, the churches, the governments, it's a lot easier to control a bunch of people, which I appreciate, when they're all kind of thinking the same way. And they're all learning the rules and they're doing their thing. And what ends up happening is people start following the rules, and then it's in conflict with who they are. And then they don't know what to do because they don't want to be thrown out of the tribe. They don't want to be ostracized. They don't want to be made fun of. They don't know how to celebrate who they really are without also really upsetting everybody around them at the same time. Yeah. So that becomes scary. So people just go, okay, I'll follow the rule and I'll just play below the surface. And that also then tells us, so it's a message back to the body, I'm abandoning you, I'm leaving you, I'm not listening to you, you're not going to get seen, you're not going to get heard. And that's some of the most common things we hear with our clients, like, I don't feel seen, I don't feel heard, I don't feel like I matter. And think about the body thinking all that. Well, of course, immune system is going to start shutting down on you or not working in your favor because it doesn't think you're worth anything.
Definitely.
Yeah, so that's a huge identity crisis.
Yeah, it comes back to that kind of trauma response as well in our bodies. And yes, like you mentioned about part of what you do is helping people to unpack that trauma and rewire those underlying trauma that's keeping them stuck, that's keeping them stressed and anxious and how they're feeling. But how specifically do you do that? I remember from talking to you before, you got 5 steps that you take to rewiring underlying trauma. Would you quickly run us through those 5 steps?
Yeah. So the first thing is actually just understanding that they're there. Because other people, oh, I'm fine. I'm like, are they?
Mm.
So it's like understanding what are the underlying issues. The first thing is just understanding that it's there. The second thing is witnessing when it's happening and what's triggering it. So if you can understand, okay, one, I believe they're there and I get it, that there's more to this. The second thing is you start witnessing and seeing it. The second thing is you start now identifying, again, what's triggering it. So number three, where is this happening? What is it triggering? So, look at, a good thing to do is for people to look at arguments that they have that feel like they have it all the time. Like with a spouse, with a friend, you're like, how are we having this argument again? What's really the problem? Like my issue, and we call these wounded children, my issue would be if somebody would talk to me like I was stupid. I was so scared of being stupid when I was a kid. My brother and sister were straight A students. I was brilliant in school and the stuff I liked, but the stuff I didn't, I was lucky I passed some of them. I was more driven by what I really enjoyed versus the rule of you were supposed to get good grades. So when you look at some of the good grade piece or the identity, my identity was I don't want to be stupid. And I had, my sister made fun of me sometimes because I did it, and I started locking into that identity. So now if somebody talks to me like I'm stupid, that wound, that child comes right up and it's like, what do you mean I'm stupid? So the understanding of where is the trigger coming from? And then the fourth piece is now you understand it. What does that triggered wounded child need? What does she need to hear? Why does she show up the way she does? And what makes her brilliant? So we don't want to see them as bad. We want to see them as they show up in an unappetizing way, sometimes to protect you. But what was the thing in the first place that they needed to know? They needed to be seen. They don't want to be made fun of. So you can reparent that wounded child by giving her what she needs. And you're the only person who would know what she needs. So, let's rewire the piece by understanding what she needs. And then the fifth part is then repeating that. And when we continue to repeat that process, there is a point where that becomes the normal. You let go of the old wound that was there before, and you celebrate what superpower came out of that. Because now I'm one of my superpowers is being able to learn information very quickly, break it down in a way, put it into a format that teaches other people to be able to absorb it themselves and use it for themselves. And so that wounded child who was terrified that she was going to think is stupid is the one who was able to look outside of the way everybody else learned it, out my way, and then come back around and teach other people that way. So it serves all these other people for me to have had that wound, but to have rewired it, right? So the repeating pattern, because there is a point where if you repeat something enough, it will dissolve the old pattern. So my wounded child, typically, I can't think of a time recently where she showed up. She really doesn't show up anymore in this like, what do you think, I'm stupid kind of energy. She shows up more in this, oh, okay, they don't mean that, they don't get that. It's me, like, let me process this differently. So when you see people going through that, the awareness, even if they can't rewire yet, just the awareness of it stops so many of the issues that come with it. Be like, oh, I see what's happening. Like, it's so exciting. And we have clients sometimes just celebrating that. They're like, I didn't go into a tailspin because I saw the wounded child was stepping in and I was being triggered, not just leaning into it and going all in.
Yeah, I love that so much. I love that those steps are really around that inner child and awareness, of course, because like that's been a pivotal part of my journey as well. And I think anybody's journey when they're on a path of healing or personal growth, whatever you want to call it. And I think we need a whole episode on that on its own. But it's so powerful. And I think when you start building that relationship with yourself, right, you then come into a greater sense of wholeness, which goes back to what you've been speaking about before. If we feel whole and there's not these parts that are all conflicted inside of us, then we start to heal from the body trying to attack itself, right?
Yeah, that's balance and harmony.
Yeah.
I mean, when we're out of balance, you get the negative response. When we're in balance, everything else seems to work that much better. All the body wants is to feel safe and homeostasis, which is balance, really. So if we can understand that, whenever we have a symptom, there is some level of us that doesn't feel safe. So then you can ask yourself that simple question: where don't I feel safe? Is it in my relationships? Is it with myself?
Yeah.
And is it how my relationship to food? A lot of times just the relationship to food. they don't feel safe.
Yeah.
So that's a huge piece. If people get nothing else but this, is that if I have a symptom, there's some level of me that doesn't feel safe.
Yeah. I think it's really important as well to define what does safety mean to you as well, because I, for a long time, was operating in this outdated statement of what safety meant for me. And it's like, for me, safety meant you cut and run, right? Like that was what kept me safe. So that's not helpful in pretty much every area of life. So as an adult, and that's your go-to to feel safe, that's going to come with a whole host of problems. So definitely we need to be identifying, okay, well, are we safe? Like, and if we're not, what's going on? But what is your definition of it in the first place? Do you even know? Is that something you've got to explore? And what's going to serve you, right, and drive you? Really, really powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that.
And it can be really incredible to work with a practitioner who you feel safe with, but who's obviously outside of you, because they work as a reflection. Like if you're working with a really good person in any of this, their biggest job, my perspective, is they need to be a better mirror back to you to help you see what you've stopped yourself from being able to see as a protective measure. So if they can reflect back to you your own words, your own pieces, the pieces that they know are blocks, to help you process that, and they don't just give you answers, which we can do too, but giving you the answer is it's helping you find where you've hidden the key to the door to the answer.
Yeah.
So the reflection is powerful.
It's so interesting that you say that. It just reminds me of somebody that I still coach with today, as and when it's needed. And she'll say things to me, or she'll reflect things back to me, and I'll be like, yeah, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure that's true. Then, like, lo and behold, a month later, like, you remember that thing that you said to me that you were reflecting back? You're so right. Because she's that skilled, you know, being that mirror. And I think it's more powerful than we give it credit for, I think.
Yeah. That's actually why we do things. We have group components to what we do as well, because what ends up happening is that there's a thread through everyone's there. There's a reason they're all there for the same time period. And we do some of the coaching in a group format. What ends up happening, it's so much more powerful sometimes than the one-on-ones, because a lot of times we don't know what we don't know because we're stopping ourselves from seeing it. You see someone else in the group talking about their story or what's going on with them. It like sets off all sorts of awareness that you're seeing their issue reflected back to you. And then you see this healing exponentially, that they're also then together healing in a whole different way. And it's so powerful because, again, it opens up examples of stuff that they wouldn't even have thought to see. So I love that too, because it allows them to heal on a whole different level.
Yeah, that's powerful. We noticed that on our Kickstarter program. It's the same thing. We have people that say like that they wouldn't have been able to articulate what it was they were experiencing, but somebody else said it, and then all of those dots connected, you know. And it's those moments that,
they're like,
it's those moments that then start to reinforce, okay, well, we're not alone in this, right? Somebody else gets it. Right. And you know, well, let's not take the conversation in this direction, but we start to get reminded that we are one, essentially. But I think that's a conversation for another.
Yes,
I think so.
But perfect. I am 100% with you.
Awesome. So, because if someone's watching this and they just after this they want to take something away, like one bit of practical advice that they could start using straight away, that maybe could bring them kind of that feeling back into balance and start their healing journey, like what would you say to them? What would you give them, and why?
Honestly, I would go back to that I am statement exercise. It's incredibly simple. You can do it anywhere. It takes just a few minutes, and it's so enlightening and so eye-opening. But really, to do it for the whole week and then wait that extra day and then go back and reflect and ask yourself, what do those words mean to me? What are the patterns that I'm seeing? Like I had one client who she went through and she said, I use colors a lot. Like I am yellow, I am orange. I'm like, okay, what does that mean to you? And she had an answer right away, but she started with, this is weird. But she had an answer right away. So those are telling you something. So that exercise just alone can be very enlightening and bring more awareness, like we talked about, to a whole scenario of things. Like, what is this going on? A lot of people will go through and say, I have so many negative words. I'm like, there's no such thing as negative and positive. Just look at them for what it is right now that you're connecting to, and try not to worry about, the power of positivity and all that stuff right now. Let's not even go there. Just what's the understanding? What's the information that it's bringing you? It's incredibly powerful exercise.
Amazing.
Awesome. Absolutely.
I love that. Listen, before we wrap up and let our listeners know where they can find you, is there anything else that you would like to add to this conversation? There's already been so much gold in there, but is there anything else you'd like to add?
Really, it's just that reiteration back to the your body was designed to heal. What it needs is the right support, the belief that has to come from here, but the understanding of you have what you need. You just might need a little bit of the tools and the support to map out the pattern for you and the strategy, but you have it. Like, it's there. You've got it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Absolutely. Getting trust, just bring that trust back to yourself again. And then a lot of things just end up kind of working themselves out as well when you start to bring that awareness and that trust back to your body. So absolutely 100% agree with that statement. So Kirstin, let our listeners know, where can they find you? If they want to kind of look you up, see the type of work you do, find out where you hang out, where can they find you? Where's the best place for them to reach out?
Okay, hang on. Well, our website is Nourish, NOURISH123.com. There's lots of fun downloads. There's a 3-day challenge. There's all sorts of stuff on there. So they can go there. We're also on, we have a YouTube channel. We've got Instagram. We're on TikTok. We're kind of everywhere. Nourish123 tends to be our handle for most things. But they can also just search my name.
Amazing. Awesome. We'll put all of those links in the show notes so everyone can come and find you. I love what you're doing. Like, it's been really lovely to connect with you today and to talk about this and to hear about what it is you're up to. Clearly you're making a difference, and that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for having me.